What should an executive's resume or CV, marketing documents, social media, etc., look like? I like that question because here's someone who's trying to get their heads around where is this value story felt? How is it implemented? That's like a few hours of conversation. But I'm just wondering, Kathleen, if we could start with you and then back to Sandra. How does that value story then inform these documents, and how is it inflected, I would say, effectively through those communications?
Okay. So, a value proposition, when we talk about brand and we talk about positioning, your value proposition needs to be positioned properly. So, when we talk about your collateral, and that's how I always refer to, various types of resume and other artifacts, that it's really about the positioning. Are you for instance, the individual, the leader who is able to lead others through transformational change? Or are you the person who helps to take organizations apart? Those, you can make an argument that that's, all transformation, but it's very different skill sets and it's very different process and methodology and thinking. And so having someone really understand, like, what is it that you're really wanting to be able to do, have not a product description, but that promise of value as part of a narrative, and then having some supporting, what I call supporting evidence underneath that to be able to justify the proposition. And if anybody, whether it literally be machine read or, of course, human eyeballs, need to be able to understand, like, who is this person and what are they capable of and what are they choosing to do. And it used to be that, well, one scroll of a mouse. Okay. And it's like, if you couldn't, it's like no different than like the top half. If you were like the top half of the fold, if you weren't able to understand that about somebody based on the right positioning and that proposition, then most times people like myself just kept moving.
Sandra.
Well, yes. So the very first thing we need to understand about somebody when we look at their collateral. So again, as Kathleen said, collateral, the days of the resume being, the one size fits all for everything are over. Well, at least it's over at the executive level. And the reason for that is because you do have different audiences that value proposition has to get communicated to. So for instance, a resume has two audiences, and that audience is the applicant tracking system, which uses AI now, which is probably making it easier on some levels to optimize your resume for the system, harder on others. And then there's the screener who looks at the resume. This is the screener for the open job that looks at the resume for about 6.25 seconds and makes one of five actions. So that, and they don't care whether you get the job or not. Most of the time, they just care whether or not they have a high sense of usefulness and a low sense of risk to whoever they're shortlisting this to. So the resume is designed for like when there's an open job. So on the other hand, you take, for instance, your network. And for VP and C-level professionals, 85% of them are going to get a job through their network. So we can get into that a little bit more if you want to as well. But we know now, based on research, that if you're interested in an introduction for somebody, which is what networking is, since most people who get in the door through network actually get in through a second or third degree connection, not a first degree, at the VP and C level, that person has to introduce you to somebody. And we know now that the resume is the best way to kill that introduction. And that's why one pagers are important. If you're interviewing and if you interview and they're like, wow, this is fantastic. I need to talk to the board about you. We're having a board meeting on Thursday. That's a different one pager. That would be for them to be able to champion you internally. So that value proposition has to be the immediate thing that they absorb, like Kathleen was talking about. But it's not going to be absorbed the same way based on what audience they are to you. If we're talking about LinkedIn, well, that's a completely different animal, because the only way someone's going to see your LinkedIn profile most of the time is one of two reasons. Somebody mentioned your name, so they go search you on LinkedIn, or you came up in a search. Well, that's all based on keywords. And so that means that your value proposition has to go through a reverse engineering of making sure that we understand which keywords that people looking for your value proposition are going to be pulling up you in search. Not in all the searches like you would in the 97%, but in fewer searches, but higher up in the search, because that's what executive recruiters do. So just to summarize, there's two things. Yes, you have to have that value proposition, but it's positioned and spelled out differently depending on who the audience is. And like they say in financial services, know your customer.
Mhm.